Yes, thanks, Saskia. So we have partners from 5 countries. First is the Netherlands. You can see Saskia and Emma. They are responsible for this international part of the conference. So we are on their Zoom room. And then the next is Slovakia. From Sea, Claudia, and Richard. And wide awake from the United Kingdom, we have Richard and Sam Steyer, and Sam Steyer is at the same time from the United States and member of the Center for Learning with Nature. He will speak after me, right? And from Magoshva Foundation, beside me, I have next to me Marta. And from the Czech Republic, from Sever, we have Milada. We all have the BLF in front of our name, so you can see the project members. And very, very briefly about the activities of the, oh, I'm sorry, yes, this was the BLF project, but we also have Melody from Turkey, who is a partner of another project, which is BioLearn 3, Expanding Nature's Genius. And she is translating modules into Turkey. So it's another project, but the Turkish participants are also taking part in this conference. So briefly the project activities. We elaborated the project website, which is available in 5 languages. And then we also elaborated the 22 biomimicry exemplars and additional 35 activities. We will talk about these in details. We organized a study trip to the Netherlands last year, and some of the participants of the study trip are taking part on the conference, and we will have chance to listen to them. Also, we elaborated how to organize biomimicry days, and we delivered them. We made playing cards about biomimicry and printed it also in 5 languages, and you can also find them on the website. And finally, we made toolboxes for trying out the modules. These toolboxes can be rented in 3 countries, in Hungary, in Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And these are very briefly about the project, and I would like to pass the word to Sam. Yes, Sam, this is your picture.
Thank you, Eva. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever. Maybe go back to sleep. I don't know where you are exactly, but we're so excited about getting to have this time with you. You can see there's educators from all around the world, but mostly Europe. And this project was really focused on Europe, but of course, we're really happy to have folks joining from wherever you may be joining. As Eva mentioned, I'm Sam Steyer. I'm the director of the Center for Learning with Nature. Learning with Nature is an organization, but more importantly, it's a philosophy and an education movement. So I just want to take one moment and put this project that we're going to be talking with you today in the context of learning with nature. The learning with nature philosophy is very simple, and that is that kids learn better when nature is part of the learning process. And this has become really well supported by research. So kids concentrate better, for example, when nature is part of their learning process. They remember things better. They learn better. They get along with other kids better when nature's part of the learning process. So they literally cooperate more when nature is part of learning. And they also enjoy learning more, which of course means they want to learn more. And there's a lot of research about this now, which is really exciting because it supports this kind of work. What's important too is that this approach to teaching works outdoors, of course. We've known that, of course, for years as environmental educators. What is sort of new is that we're learning that it also works indoors. It works with pictures of nature, sounds of nature, especially concepts and ideas about nature. And because it can work indoors, it means that you can do this approach to teaching in classrooms. And that's something that is very new and very important because, of course, a lot of kids, they don't maybe get outside that much, even as part of field trips. Maybe those are quite rare. But if we can do this in classrooms, it means we can meet the kids where they are, where they spend the vast majority of their educational time during the most formative period of their lives. So we can actually have a huge impact on kids and who they are as it become as adults by teaching this way. And it works, this approach to teaching works with any subject. So it works with math. You can teach math through nature in the classroom. It works with chemistry. It works with reading. Whatever subject it is that you're teaching, you can bring the natural world in. What matters is meaningfully connecting the natural world to what kids are learning. What matters is meaningfully connecting the natural world to what they're learning. That's the important part. So part of my work for the last 15 years has been in creating those curricula and training teachers to teach subjects in these new ways. And that's the education movement. This project that we're talking with you about today is part of that. And there's two other reasons I want to mention about why it's a good idea to teach this way. While kids are learning this way, they're simultaneously learning that nature is amazing. They're learning that, it's the most fascinating phenomena on our planet. And that nature is worthy of their attention. It's important and it is extremely valuable. So while you're teaching this way, those kids are falling in love with the natural world a little bit more than they would have otherwise. And it means they want to explore nature more. They want to protect nature more. And those lessons, perhaps more than any other, we deeply need the next generation to learn. Now, the other reason I wanted to mention why it's great to teach this way is because it's a lot of fun for the teachers. And you're the most important component here in the whole educational process. You're why learning even happens. And so when you're having more fun, you're more engaged, and that's great for you. And of course, the kids learn better if you're more engaged and excited about what you're teaching, what you're communicating with the kids. So that's another very important reason. So we call this project BioLearn. BioLearn, it actually started about 6 years ago. The project we're going to be talking about is been a 3-year project, but it started 6 years ago. Ava, who you just heard from, she saw some of the curricula that the Center for Learning with Nature created, and she contacted me and she asked me if I wanted to be part of this project. And I'm so happy I said yes, because it's been a really wonderful experience. The overall goal of BioLearn has been to make biomimicry, which is design inspired by nature, accessible to educators, especially in Europe. And so our first project, those first 3 years, was focused more on older students, 12 to 16 years old. And this project that we'll be talking about today is focused on younger students, ages about 9 to 12. And the project, as I mentioned, I really feel like has been truly a success. And you may have, hopefully you've watched a video that we sent out earlier, which just showed you one classroom and the work of a teacher that brought nature into the classroom. They looked at structural color, which is a way that color is created in the natural world. And they had this activity in which they created chocolate that was iridescent, that cast off rainbows as a way to explore structural color. All right, so why do I have this picture of a flower up here? Well, it's nice to see flowers, yes, but I also put it up here because it has a bit of meaning to me. It's a plant that's found near where I live in Montana in the United States. And if you look closely at it, you'll see that those flowers are in rows and they open in sequence. And each row of flowers supports the pollinators that then pollinate the next row of flowers over many weeks. And this is, I think, a really beautiful design. I also think it's sort of an analogy to this project and even to this conference, because as educators, we pass on knowledge from one generation to the next, right? That's what we do. And the result of that is that we improve society. So you can think of society as sort of blossoming in sequence, one generation to the next. So for me, the flower symbolizes passing on things like beauty and wonder and the values that we've learned that are useful and important to the next generation. And that's what we're engaged in together today during this conference. And it really is one of the most important things we could be doing with our time, because we get to the future that way. And it's the only way that that can happen. So I really want to thank you again for being here. We'll have a really good time together over these next few hours. I think it'll be worth it for you. So I'm really happy that we get to do this again. What I'm going to show you next is a pre-recorded welcoming from Dana Baumeister. If Janine Benyus is sort of the founder of the modern movement of biomimicry, Dana is Janine's right-hand woman. She's been there from the very early days of this work, and I'm really pleased that she could welcome everybody here today. So I'm going to turn on the video. You may need to turn up your volume a little bit in order to hear the video. Just be aware of that. All right, so let me share my screen and play that video.
Hello, welcome to the Biomimicry Educators Conference in 2024. I'm Dr. Dana Baumeister, and I have been a professor of practice, both teaching biomimicry and doing biomimicry now for more than 25 years. I am so delighted that you're here as passionate educators and perpetual students of what it means to bring biomimicry to eager audiences. Sounds like it's going to be an incredible conference. It's an important time for the field of biomimicry to begin thinking about what does it look like for the next 25 years? What does it look like for us to transform not just what we learn, but also how we learn? And I love biomimicry for all of the things that bring to the classroom an opportunity for students to engage in new and novel ways. Of course, biomimicry has its incredible outcomes. It's very inspiring to learn from nature, to figure out how we actually learn from nature, and to generate important and critical solutions for a changing world, solutions that bring about a more sustainable world. But if you haven't done it yet, or you're in the process of bringing biomimicry to the classroom, you know that it does even more than that. It helps people engage across disciplines. If you're doing biomimicry alone, you're not doing biomimicry. And so learning in community with others in different perspectives, it invites and actually welcomes those different perspectives. Of course, it evokes a lot of curiosity. It evokes creativity. It brings out collaboration. We embed systems thinking into our training because that's such an important part of how we think about problems and how we think about effective solutions. And all of these skills that you learn in learning biomimicry are also critically important for the rest of our work in the world, whether you're practicing biomimicry or not. And so you all, as teachers and passionate educators around biomimicry, I hope you get a ton out of this conference. I'm sorry that I'm not there to be with you, but I know that you're in great hands. You're going to learn a lot. And the best part of being a practitioner, being an educator, learning biomimicry is that we get to do it outside. So hopefully you'll have opportunities during the conference to do just that. And if not, you know where it is. So go outside, visit some new teachers, some more than human teachers, and take that wisdom back into your classroom and share it with a bunch of eager minds. So enjoy and have a great time.
Thank you, Dana. Even though you can't hear me say that, hopefully you'll feel it. Okay, so next we are going to hear from Richard Dawson, who is a member of the BioLearn team. Richard is a truly gifted educator. He is a joy to work with, so I'll hand things over to him.
Thank you, Sam. And yeah, a big welcome to everybody who's joined the conference. I think we're at 118 people at the moment. So just imagine 118 people talking, sharing, discussing biomimicry when they go away from this conference. So even though we might feel we're just one person learning and sharing, multiply that by 118 times. And that's the power of coming together in this sort of group. Just like, you know, a swarm of bees is far more effective than a single bee. So we can multiply our efforts together. So I'm just trying to confirm my speaking language. I'm not speaking Dutch. I just want to say a few things about what's going to happen over the next 90, 100 minutes, just to orientate you about how the learning is going to take place. So I'm going to share my screen briefly. Okay, so in this kind of international part, we're together from, I think, about 8 or 9 different countries, all sharing biomimicry. So we had an introduction, we had a bit about the conference, and now we're going to go into some more kind of interactive activities where we're learning together. And really, you know, biomimicry is about sparking that sense of curiosity, that inquiry, which are key skills in biomimicry or any good learning process. So in a way, in the next 90 minutes, we're hoping to engage your curiosity and your inquiry skills. So we're going to be doing some activities together. We're going to be using the chat function in Skype so you can share answers and share responses together. And at any time, if you have any questions, put them into the chat. And then at the end of the international part, we'll try and get back to some of those questions. Or you might find one of the team will answer one of your questions during the conference. So anytime, put a question in the chat box. The other thing to say is I recognise we're not all native English language speakers. So some people might find it easier if they want to write something in the chat in their own language. So if you feel you can only express something in Hungarian or Czech or Dutch or Turkish or Slovak, please use your own language and one of the team will translate it into English so everybody can read what you're saying. So don't feel language is going to be a barrier. And in that vein, you know, we're all here, we have something to offer. We're all experts in our own way. So feel free to use that chat as a way to add a comment or express something about the content. Great. So I hope everybody came prepared for the conference. And if you read your email, you would have brought with you an egg. So feel free to show your egg. And why did I ask you to bring an egg? Well, sometimes we think subjects like biomimicry are really difficult to teach. So on the project website, we've developed the 22 really quick, simple ways of teaching biomimicry, of learning something from nature. So I'm going to invite you to take your egg, and you might want to put a tea towel underneath your egg just in case. If you wear rings or jewelry on your fingers, just take them off. And then take your egg, put it into your hand, and gently squeeze your egg. If it's like my egg, it's a little bit cold coming out of the fridge. Oh, Zuza's joining us. Amazing, I haven't seen her for years. So just squeeze your egg and just see if you can break it. Just imagine that every morning you make an omelette and you crack the egg and it seems to break so simply. But now when you're squeezing the egg, and I'm squeezing quite hard now, these weight gym sessions haven't been helping me because my egg is still unbroken. Saskia's egg is still unbroken. Go Saskia, you can squeeze harder. Oh, it's amazing. An egg which we think is something quite delicate and fragile, and the shell is quite thin, just made up of calcium carbonate, natural materials, seems to be really quite strong. And I'm just wondering if anybody out there knows why the egg has this property of strength. If anybody could write in the chat any thoughts about why the egg is, when we squeeze it like this, it's quite hard to break. Or in my case, unbreakable. If anybody's got any thoughts about why the egg is difficult to break when we squeeze it, just add that into the chat. Oh, form, that's a good answer. It's oval, the hen sits in it, the hen does sit in it, and it doesn't break because of the form, pressure dispersion, structure. Great answers. Should be able to carry the weight of mum and dad. Well, actually, if you get your mum and dad and stand them on top of the egg, or a crate of eggs, it will hold the weight of certainly a small child. Maybe not your mum and dad. But yeah, eggs have this amazing quality of strength due to the shape and the structure. So when we're squeezing an egg, rather than all the force going into one area, like it would be when we crack an egg on a saucepan, the force is dissipated around the whole of the egg. So no single point of the egg takes all the force and all the structure. So as somebody's saying, it's like perfect architecture. Yeah, it's a dome. And if I just share my screen again, we can look at that in a bit more detail. Oops. Yeah, so the curves transfer the force of your hand around the whole egg. So no single spot has to absorb all the pressure. So that's a really useful principle. So the strength comes from the form of the egg. And then if we look into the human world, we'll see that form, that shape, that curve mimicked in lots of human applications. So we see it in bridges, we see it in airplane windows with the cut-out corners, we see it around cars. And we notice this is not a new observation. Humans have been noticing this for many years by the shape of this bridge we can see. So these use of curves to create strength minimizes the amount of material we need to perform that function of strength. So also that's a kind of a sustainability win as well, because we're using less natural resources to deliver this function of strength in the egg. So that's a really, really quick and simple way to introduce biomimicry to any class. And as Sam was saying, you could do that indoors, you could do that just about anywhere. So let's move on. We might also kind of legitimately ask, or your students might ask, you know, what has nature ever done for me? You know, we talk about nature all the time, but what's nature ever done for me in terms of innovation, in terms of creativity? So again, I'm going to invite you to use the chat function. I'm just sharing with you 8 different organisms, natural artifacts, if you like. And I'd like you to just think to yourselves, what has inspired, what inventions have been inspired by each of these 8 different organisms? Yeah, and have a think about each organism, and then put your suggestion for the innovation into the chat. So you might look at the kingfisher and think, well, what did the kingfisher inspire? What did the lotus leaf inspire? What did the slime mold inspire? Or you might look at the gecko's foot, or the lily, which is number 5, or the mycelium on number 6. Number 7, bacteria, and number 8, the ever cute and lovable water bear. So I can see some answers coming in. We've got the train, which I think is connected to the kingfisher. We've got like geckos and adhesive tape. Got some answers in Dutch, which I'm hopefully Saskia's translating. Waterproof repellent clothing coming from Andy. ICT networks from Arno. Great. That wasn't the answer I had, but that's a good answer as well. Got the vortex, which I think is the lily. Making vaccinations last longer in extreme circumstances from Loyen. That's the water bear, I'm guessing. Sticking feet. Thank you, Susanna. Rain resistance. Any more suggestions? Any more suggestions? I'll give you another 12 seconds. Self-sticking materials. Dry adhesives for cleaning technology from geckos. Raincoats. Coffin out of mycelium. Yeah, the coffin that takes you back into nature. So you'll always exist. Ketchup bottles. Oh, Saskia, nice. I might ask you to explain that one. Medicines against bacteria. I might ask Sigrid to explain the coffin as well. Packaging from mycelium. Great. So there are lots of answers out there. Nanotape. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. I mean, I think you know all of these. But again, they're really quick and accessible examples that pupils can grasp quite quickly, that biomimicry or nature can inspire human inventions that make our lives better. So kind of quickly, the bullet train, exactly. We all know the bullet train. It's a classic engineering example with biomimicry, how that when the train was passing through a tunnel, it built up a cushion of air, which when the train exited the tunnel created this loud boom, which was slightly disconcerting for the neighbours living around the tunnel. And then the Japanese engineer, observing how the kingfisher seemed to transition from the air, a very low drag environment, into water, kind of a high drag environment, created very little splash. And the tapered beak of the kingfisher seemed to be the mechanism the bird used to kind of enter the water. And so they experimented with different shapes on the front of the Shinkansen bullet train, and they found that by creating this similar tapered shape, it reduced the buildup of air in the tunnel and prevented that big sonic boom sound. It also made it 10 to 15% more efficient. So again, another sustainability win. Next, the lotus leaves. The lotus leaves have these kind of wax crystals and folds all over the surface of the leaf. And it kind of creates these kind of pyramid-like cone structures you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. So that means when a water droplet falls onto the leaf, it's got nowhere to grip. It's got no surface to grip onto. So it slips off at the slightest breeze. And as it slips off the leaf, it takes any dust, any dirt away with it. So if you notice, lotus leaves are always generally quite dry and generally looking very clean despite the mud they often come out of. And this same principle is being mimicked into, for example, paints, which create the same microscopic surface structure, which means water runs off really easily. It's very hydrophobic, water repelling, and at the same time taking off the dirt and keeping it clean. The slime molds, amazing unicellular organisms that can map very complex networks without a brain, a nervous system, or any organs that we might consider to be remotely human. It just shows that having a brain is somewhat overrated in the animal or natural world. And slime molds have been around for about 1 billion years, and they're really efficient at finding food and communicating to each other where that food is. And I love the idea that a group of quite bored Japanese scientists used oat flakes to map all the train stations in Japan, and then use slime mold to see what the connection would be. And the slime mold was able to kind of create this very complex network of connections between all the train stations in Japan in 5 to 6 days, when it took engineers and computer scientists months and months to do that same amount of work. So it's a very simple rule that a slime mold uses for behavior can be created into an algorithm to create computers to do the same thing. It's called a slime mold. Saskia might, or somebody might know the Latin name. Put it into chat if you wish. They're also making slime mold powered computers in a university in the southwest of England. They're quite slow, but again, it's changing the way we think about computing. The gecko tape, another classic example. This is more about physics. So it's using van der Waals forces, these kind of positive, negative, ionic bonding that connect two things together. So the gecko have these millions of tiny hairs which bond onto a surface and create these tiny, tiny bonds, but all together, added together, they create enough grit for the gecko to stay on the surface. You can even create gecko tape, which does the same thing, but using synthetic hairs to hold a human onto a wall. Do it safely. And I've seen it done with pupils in a school. Again, into physics, you know, the lily has this kind of this spiral system, a fractal system pattern you often see in nature, because it's a much more efficient way of moving liquids and moving things around with less resistance. So again, scientists have created ways of mixing and circulating water using spiral patterns because it's more energy efficient. And I think Saskia might have been also been referring to the non-stick surfaces on the lilies, which enable water and things to slip inside. So again, there's more than one idea with the lilies. And then the mycelium, I didn't think about mycelium coffins, but that's, yeah, I like that idea. If you haven't made that into a business, then I think you probably should. But again, the biology of mycelium, how they bond things together, and companies are using mycelium to create heat-resistant insulation for buildings, which is testing out as being more thermally efficient than some other man-made insulation materials, and also being used to grow kind of packaging that is biodegradable. And again, you can do this with pupils in a classroom quite easily. They can grow mycelium shapes, so they can really get a first-hand feel of, yes, I can see how this actually works. And then the bacteria. So concrete, in a way, is the material that makes the world go round. Over time, even concrete degrades, and it costs billions and billions of dollars to repair. But what if concrete could heal itself just in the way that our skin does? So a scientist looked at a particular bacteria which is found in rocks and produces limestone. So this bacteria has been kind of infused into the concrete, and it can live for 200 years, and when exposed to air, it starts reacting and producing limestone and fills in the crack. So in a way that the bacteria do the job of repairing the cracks in the concrete. So imagine if you're kind of walking down the street and you're seeing cracks in the pavement. Maybe a few days later or a week later, those cracks disappear because the bacteria are doing their work, creating the limestone and filling those cracks, and saving money and resources at the same time. And finally, another chemistry example from the water bear. So you've got a tiny, very common invertebrate found in the soil in your front lawn through to the Antarctic Ocean. It can extend extremes of temperature down to -80 degrees to +80 degrees, pressures 6,000 times greater than the deepest ocean. So they're really quite remarkable species, are really worth studying. And the particularly unique thing about the water bear is that they can dry out and stay in a state of cryptobiosis, or kind of suspended animation, for as many as 120 years. So again, if you want to preserve yourself in this mycelium coffin, You can maybe dry yourself out and then rebirth yourself 120 years later. But basically, they're using this principle of the kind of watery film that wraps around the water bear to preserve tissue samples and biopsy samples in medical facilities. And the potential is they could start using the same idea to preserve medicines and vaccines, which if you're trying to get these to really remote, inhospitable areas without a good transport network or refrigeration network, the vaccines often go out of date. So we could produce them in a way where they're kind of dried up as before and then get rehydrated when they're injected. We can store them for longer and more people can get life-preserving, life-saving vaccines in parts of the world that they don't regularly get them now. So for me, what this tells me is that, in a way, nature is full of solutions looking for problems to solve. And all we've got to do really is, as educators, as learners, as scientists, as kind of just curious thinkers, is look into nature and ask questions, not what is that thing called, but what can we learn from that thing, that Namib beetle in the picture? What does it do? What's its special talent? So in a way, biomimicry is kind of flipping the question rather than what are we learning about nature, but what are we learning from nature? What can we glean from the natural world that's going to help us to make an invention or something better for the planet and for everybody? So I'm going to set you another little activity now. Now we've kind of started to get a better sense of biomimicry and the potential of biomimicry. It's time for you to do a bit of thinking on your own. So maybe you brought something with you from your garden, a natural artifact, a twig, a branch, or maybe a leaf as I've got here. If not, then there's a set of pictures on the screen in front of you and feel free to choose any of these. But if you've got your natural artifact or one of these images, have a think to yourself initially, what does this thing do? What's the purpose of this leaf or this twig or this tiger's claw or mycelium? What does it do? What's the purpose of the object? And if you're using a biomimicry language, we'll say, what is its function? So just spend a minute looking at your object. You might want to hold it up to the light somehow, look at it very closely. You might want to smell it. Just want to touch it, see what the surface feels like. If it's rough, is it smooth? Really get a sense of the object and ask yourself that question. What's its purpose? So what does this leaf do for the tree? What does that twig do for the tree? What does the fur and a cat do for the cat? And then just invite you to name your organism and the function or the purpose in the chat. So if you've got a leaf and you think the purpose is to catch water, then just type into the chat leaf catch water. So again, we can share some of our ideas and our thinking about what the different things in nature do, what are their purpose. So a shell is, the function is to protect or to keep safe. Yeah, thank you, Donnie. A stone, minerals to feed plants. Yeah, or stones are even part of that wider carbon cycle under that kind of function. Leaf has a function to make oxygen or to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen through photosynthesis. So we have the chestnut seed, the outer part is for protection from different threats. Yeah, the spikes. Someone's got a pine cone, so keeping seeds safe, also spreading them. So yeah, things in nature often have multiple functions, unlike often in the UK, often in the human world, we build things with a single function. Yeah, in nature, often things have multiple functions. The flowers have that function to attract, which might be through the colours or the scent or the shape. The bone gives structure to the body. Yeah, imagine humans without a good solid bone structure. Will just be some sort of jelly floating along the floor like some large amoeba. Bones also give strength, of course. The gall on the leaf is to protect it from an insect, yeah. Flower, for a new generation, looking for pollen. Yes, the flowers are attracting pollinators, the nails to attack. Yeah, hadn't thought of that one. Or maybe defend, not just for painting. The moss is the moss in a system function, it holds water to kind of keep the whole system with a supply of water, keep it moist and prevent things like flooding. What else? Nails slip prevention, yeah. So nails can give grip. So the function of providing grip on icy or wet or slippy surfaces. Thorns save water, reduce evaporation, and protect. The often thorns around plants, they create a little microclimate to prevent wind from drying out or reduce the amount of transpiration from a plant. Okay, any more? And then we'll move on. Shells for growth, yeah, so finding a home. Mycelium for communication. Thank you, Sylvia. So communication between, not just between mycelium, but between mycelium and other plants within that forest ecosystem, the trees, and they had this kind of reciprocal relationship where they're giving and sharing with each other. So again, you can do this with pupils, and you can get them to go out and think of these ideas for themselves, or do some online research, and get them to work out, what do these things do, rather than what do we call them, how do we name them. Naming things is helpful and useful. It enables us to talk about them, but at the same time, we're kind of flipping the learning, saying, well, what can we learn from this? In a way, that is, again, it's a key skill in biomimicry. So saying, well, what does that thing do? What's its purpose? And then, I wonder if we could learn something from that. So the clause, and can we create something from that? Okay, so I'm just going to share with you my example. And again, feel free to use the chat, ask questions or add comments at any point. So I had a leaf. This is my leaf from just outside in the garden. As you can see, I live in quite a warm, hot climate, so it's quite a shiny leaf to prevent water loss. And I looked at the leaf in terms of 4 things. So that there's redundant systems in a leaf. So we can see in the leaf that the veins all interconnect. So if one part of the leaf is damaged, the liquid, the sucrose, the sugars can still flow from the leaf down into the tree, and nutrients going vice versa. So if the leaf is damaged by a caterpillar, the leaf can still function. So that redundant system is there, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. The other is the fact that leaves create energy through photosynthesis. So somebody said they produce oxygen, but in a way that's the byproduct. What the leaf is doing is producing energy for itself through photosynthesis. And again, I'll give you a little example of that in a second. Yeah, resilience through redundancy, variability and decentralization. Thank you, Byron. Again, I'll give you a little example of that in a second. So Murray's law is, again, each of these leaves, each of these veins are at different sizes, and they're all sized really precisely to make the maximum flow of liquid with the minimum energy required. So again, I'll give you a little example of that in a second. The other one is, I always find one of the most remarkable, that leaves produce their mass out of thin air. So they just take carbon from the thin air to produce their mass. So I always find that remarkable. And years ago, a scientist, as many scientists thought, trees grow by taking things from the soil to produce their mass. So the scientist planted a tree in a big pot. He weighed the soil, he weighed the tree, and he let it grow for about 15 years. Then after 15 years, he measured the tree and he measured the weight of the soil. And the weight of the soil had hardly changed, which confused him because he assumed the mass of the soil would decrease because the mass of the tree increased. But obviously, trees do not get their mass in general from the soil. The majority of the mass of a tree comes from carbon in the atmosphere. What a remarkable discovery that would have been, completely flipping your ideas about how a tree creates its mass. So redundant systems, anybody who flies will be very pleased to know that all planes have triple systems in place. So the activators on the back of a plane, which make the tail rudder move back and forth. There are 3 activators, these things which convert electricity into physical energy to push the fins left and right. So there's 3 of those. So if one fails, you're still okay. The second one fails, you're still okay. And you've got time to land pretty quickly. So redundant systems keep us safe. Yeah. So we've just been having flooding where I live, but there's a whole network of drainage ditches. So if one gets filled up, they divert the water to a different one. So they're able to keep most of where I live free from flooding by having this kind of redundant system. This is Murray's law. So again, it's about looking at the diameter of each of those veins we've seen a leaf and calculating the optimum diameter of a pipe to move liquids with a minimum energy. And there's a ratio that's been taken from the way plants and leaves do this and applied to engineering and building plants into building pipes into engineering factories. And I won't pretend to understand the equation. The dye-sensitized solar cells, again, scientists have looked at a molecular dye which absorbs sunlight in the same way that chlorophyll does. And as it absorbs the sunlight, the electrons in that molecular dye get excited. And this energy from the excited electrons is harnessed through the dye-sensitized solar cell. So rather than using silicon and rare earth metals to produce a photovoltaic cell, we can reduce some of that impact by using a molecular dye to mimic chlorophyll, to make solar cells which are more sustainably efficient, as well as producing low carbon energy sources. So again, just by looking at a leaf, we can see all these different potential ideas coming out. And the final one, that mass from thin air. So there are companies now starting to produce building materials, building blocks, by trapping the carbon from the atmosphere using bacteria to fix that carbon and create that into building blocks. So imagine that the next house you live in or you build is manufactured out of the carbon from the atmosphere rather than stone from the ground. And given that we face a climate crisis, it seemed a pretty important opportunity to build the houses we need, at the same time reduce the amount of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So again, biomimicry has this opportunity not only to create more innovation, more bio-inspired products and services, but also there's a sustainability win in that as well. So by mimicking the way that nature does things, we can also create a sustainability gain. And the company doing that is called BioMason. I think there's more than one. There's some doing concrete as well. Again, Sam or Saskia might put those company names into the chat, or anybody else knows, put the name in the chat. But BioMason is certainly one in the States. Yeah, thank you, Saskia. Okay, so you've had a go at looking at how nature inspired human innovations. Blue Planet, thank you, Sam. ULAC Technologies, great, Sam, thank you. You've had a go at looking at what we can learn from the natural world, how the natural world functions, how it does things, and how we can learn from that in terms of human innovations. So you've been using these skills of curiosity and inquiry and observation, which are really good general learning and science skills, also critically important in biomimicry. Because again, as Sam was saying, biomimicry has this great quality of getting students hands-on in the natural world, not just learning from books. So maybe we're edging towards a definition of biomimicry, which I know Saskia is going to talk about, so I'm not going to give you a definition. But before Saskia talks to us, I thought maybe, what does biomimicry mean to you? How would you define biomimicry? What does it mean for you? So again, have a think and put it into the chat. One of all of one, inspiration for life and work. Thank you, Milan. Byron, discovering nature's genius and sharing with companies and younger folks to instill awe. I like that. Yeah, you go away from a lesson going, wow. There's a story of a child and a family I worked with in Northern Ireland, and the child was telling the parents that you don't know what biomimicry is. So this child had kind of been really excited by biomimicry and innovation and invention, and she was surprised that her parents didn't know what biomimicry was. So just that sense of awe and inspiration, and as Sam's saying, a way of falling in love with nature. And a way of remembering that we are of nature. We are not separate from nature. We are part of the natural world, and we rely inherently on nature for our survival. Putting a smile on my face, always a wonder, survival, adventure, problem solving, kind problem solving. So again, in biomimicry, this kind of idea, we're not using biomimicry to create biodegradable bombs, or using it to create things which help life to flourish, to help all life to flourish, whether it's human or non-human life. For me, biomimicry is a way of looking at nature in a different way and using it for conversations in companies to make them realise that everything is connected as natural ecosystems. Yeah, and there are more and more examples of companies, even big companies like Microsoft, using biomimicry as part of their design and innovation process. So, and I think it'd be too bold to say that biomimicry is going to provide all our solutions, but it's a vital part of that process of inspiring designers to think differently. Imitation of living with nature, love, hope, happiness. Thank you, Elif. Hope. Yeah, so biomimicry brings you an active way of not just wanting something different, but hope is an active verb. We have to activate that. So biomimicry gives you a process for turning that desire for a sustainable future into something tangible you can do in your school, in your classroom, with your company, with your consulting. And realizing how important diversity in nature is for learn reason. So I think you've got a huge definition there. So it'll be certainly unnecessary of me to try and give you a definition at this stage. I think you've all got an amazing definition there. And I can see from the chat, you're all developing that little curiosity, that sense of inquiry, that sense of curiosity, a sense of reconnecting with each other and the natural world, understanding we are nature. Thank you, Tess. That's so important. It's not just about building, innovating, and creating new products and services. It's also about stepping back and going, isn't it just beautiful just to be as nature, just connecting, relaxing, and just kind of using nature as that way to heal ourselves. Natural psychotherapies are becoming more popular. Mindfulness in the natural world becoming more and more popular. So nature has this kind of healing quality in and of itself. So I'd like to hand over, I think, now to Saskia, who will, I think, give us a bit more of a technical introduction to biomimicry and share some of her amazing experiences and practices, not only from the Netherlands, but around the world. And I met Saskia about, actually more years ago than we probably both remember. But what I remember is her enthusiasm for, and not just her enthusiasm, but her real depth of knowledge in biomimicry, and the way she kind of very patient with me in terms of explaining things and keeping it simple and nurturing that love of the natural world and the love of biomimicry. So a big personal thank you to Saskia, and I'll hand you over to Saskia.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for your kind words and making it really practical now in front. I wish I could see everybody holding the egg, but I saw mainly faces. Yes, I can still eat mine later on today. And we actually did that exercise in classes with so many kids. You need to bring more than one egg, because there will always be some that will, little cheat, but it's a fun exercise every time again. So yes, thank you. I also have something to share, a presentation. Let me do that now. hopefully you can see my screen now. Great. Just hiding my own face so it can be more focused. So yes, so my piece for today, there may be a little bit of, well, not so much overlap in the same examples, I think, but it's, I think, reinforcing what you've heard so far. Something about myself. I am one of the founders of Biomimicry NL. So we are based in the Netherlands. We started already in 2010. And since then, we have been just sharing our fascination and enthusiasm and passion for biomimicry. That's what we basically want to do. Tell people what it is, how to do it, teach them how to do it. So that I think the more people that know how to do it and start applying it, the quicker we can move or transition to a healthier, happier, maybe fairer world for all of us. So I just wrote in the chat one of the definitions I use for biomimicry is I also see it as a big integration course for us humans to become well-adapted earthlings on this planet. And when I learned about biomimicry in the, already now 15 years ago, I couldn't sort of hold off of it. It was an instant, infectious business, and I just quit my job, went all in, did the biomimicry professional program with Biomimicry 3.8 in Arizona State University. And at the moment we are doing a lot of stuff in education, but also lots of talks and exhibitions. And we are also helping companies to innovate with this innovation approach. So perhaps we get to talk a bit more about it later on if you like to hear about it. But for now, let's get into what I wanted to show you. Before before we were planning this conference, we talked about that I would say something about what is biomimicry, but maybe let's take one step back. I think before the more important thing is, why do we want to do it in the first place? And I know for some of you that are seasoned biomimicry educators yourself, this may be well known, but every time that I share this perspective, it sort of blows my mind. If we think about our blue marble, our planet Earth, and how, according to science, it is 4.5 billion years old. That's such a long time. 4.5 billion years old. And what others have done so cleverly is to put that 4.5 billion years in just one calendar year. So imagine 1st of January, boom, the Earth came about. And then it still takes a very long time until first life would exist. So in our first calendar year, if we would have sort of the birth of Earth, 1st January, where we are now in this conference on the 31st, nanosecond before the new year, then only on the 25th of February, so 3.8 billion years ago, life appears on this planet. And so that's late February. And then us, Homo sapiens, we only come to the stage just about 25 minutes before midnight of that whole year. And if we think, a lot of people, when they think about innovation, they think about the period from our industrial revolution onwards. And that is only 2 seconds before midnight. So to me, every time again, I'm thinking, oh, we are just, we are toddlers. Maybe we're just babies on this planet, but we have such a huge impact. In fact, we are the only organisms that are fouling our own nests. So that's why I have to keep thinking about, this is really an integration course. And if we compare ourselves to many of the other organisms, we see some big difference in how we do stuff. if you think about these tall trees and how they get water all the way up in the canopy without any electric pumps, compare that how we have to raise water all the way up in our high-rises buildings. Or if you think about the way we produce color, or we use most of the time lots of pigments and dyes to color our textiles. But if you see these beautiful beetles, and there's many other organisms, many birds, the peacock or the butterflies, magpies, they all use structural color. So the structure is making the color. The different layers within the surface are reflecting and refracting the sunlight in different length waves. And that's why we see those brilliant colors. But if you think about how much dye we need, toxic materials to color even probably my own sweater today. And it's not only the coloring, it's also the water that is that we need for this process. So where nature is producing color without any wastewater release, look at this staggering number of the water that we need to dispose of once we want to dye our fabrics. Or I think if we look at other materials that we're producing, you probably know that spider webs, the spider produces it from chopped up flies within its stomach. And once the spider web is no longer needed, to some spiders, it's food again. And if you compare the spider web with steel, it's 5 times stronger. But look at the temperature that is needed to produce it. It's such a big difference. So I think we're looking at nature. There's so many more sustainable innovations we can do. And I think that's why it's also so important for us to bring this to the classrooms. I'm not sure how it is in your countries, but over here we very often have these rebellion extinction blockages and young people or that going on strike or want to protest. And I think with biomimicry, we can give them also some actionable thing to help create a more future-proof future for themselves. And another important thing is that it really links to interdisciplinary learning, to the 21st century skills, that in many countries there's more focus on how STEAM or STEM subjects relate to biomimicry. So that's where we're finding a lot of uptake by teachers, why they want to include biomimicry in their lessons. And we will probably talk a bit more about it later on, but we've done some BioLearn days, and I know more people will talk about it. But for the Netherlands, we found that after doing such a day, pretty high scores of how they found it. So where 1 is the lowest and 10 is the highest, almost half of them gave the day a 10, and only few a 6 or lower, as you can see. We also asked them how they would feel about tackling sustainability after taking this class. And kids were much more confident that they could address these societal issues. And I think that is really important. So I can see how hope is coming with doing biomimicry. We also found that kids are becoming more interested in science in general. And I think that's a good thing. Don't you agree? And finally, 83% wanted to learn more about biomimicry. So it's not just a let's do one time a biomimicry day. It's also giving us some sort of evidence that, hey, if you do this more often, if you can integrate this more often in your classes, in your lessons, and maybe not just one biomimicry day, but integrate pieces of it throughout the whole curriculum, kids will really be interested in it. So I think that for why I want to do biomimicry anyway, but more about what is biomimicry. Well, we've seen some cool examples, and I think most people would describe biomimicry as those cool examples. But I was happy to see in the chat also some other comments about reconnecting and about the ethos side of things, so the more sustainability part of it. And it is, in fact, really, these three elements are key to biomimicry. You cannot, if you are only addressing one of these three elements, you're not fully doing biomimicry. You're not doing the deep biomimicry. So we explain usually this, or I explain the ethos part as, well, for us as a species to really have a deep desire to fit in on Earth. That humans are not above all the other organisms, but we are part of this larger system, and that we, like many others, want to learn how to live a well-adapted life within the planetary boundaries on this planet. So this is what is driving the why do you want to do biomimicry in the first place. It is close to, I think, the corporate CSR, corporate sustainability and responsibility, something like that. Sorry, I can't come up with the acronym. People can put it in the chat now. But it's sort of the sustainability driver or regeneration driver. Next to that, so this is the why do you want to do biomimicry in the first place. The reconnect piece is more, I think, of a mindset. And we put the re in brackets, as you can see, because some kids or some people have never felt connected to nature or the rest of nature. Some of us have forgotten about it. And I think our buildings are a big part of it, that we have lost this direct connection. But this is also remembering us to, you can do a lot of biomimicry behind your screen on your laptop, but we really want people also to go outside. So if you want to do biomimicry in your lessons, be strongly advised to take classes outdoors, even if that, of course, there are some well, issues or things to think about before you can do it. But it doesn't have to be a big nature park. Even the schoolyard is, in many cases, sufficient to start doing it. But this is where you will, it's a big difference if you read something about an organism, or if I'm here right now in the Netherlands, it's a bit of a rainy day. If I walk outside and I see some plants that are water repellent or others are storing it, it's a different, and I can see it with my own eyes. It helps you to start thinking differently about how smart maybe nature is. And I think if you start learning to love it, you're also more want to maybe protect it or treat it better if you can see it as your mentor. And then, of course, finally, so this part with the reconnect, there's this sort of acknowledging that we are nature too, and not separate from it. And finally, the emulate piece, that is where, most of the stories are about, the one about, the spider web compared to steel. And we typically address that as the action of doing biomimicry. So we have the why, the ethos, the mindset, and the respect comes with the reconnect, and the emulate is the action. And if you only do the action without the ethos and the reconnect, you're sort of missing the point. You're not doing it deeply. So that's why I really wanted to emphasize this part. Well, and then if you are going to do biomimicry with this ethos and reconnect in you, you can still do it on different levels. You can look at form, you can look at processes, or even whole ecosystems. So just some examples, and one for form, it's a well-known one, the shark and shark skin. Well, this is form on the nano micro level, but you could also, the one that Richard talked about with the lily, and maybe the lily impeller, that is already maybe more going to the macro scale. So you can look at forms in many different levels. So yeah, shark skins are protecting sharks from algae landing on it. So their structure gives a really good antibacterial component. And this now is used as anti-fouling, but also in hospitals. They created a coating with a microstructure inspired by the shark skin. And or we could look at processes. So you have some chemical processes. Well, Richard already asked you about this mass from thin air. Well, Blue Planet is taking CO2 from smokestacks, is bubbling it through seawater to combine it with the calcium carbonate, like the coral reefs are making their hard materials from CO2, and then they outprecipitate the minerals to create cement. So this is cement made from CO2 instead of emitting lots of CO2 in traditional Portland cement. But we can also not only look at chemical processes, we could also learn from nature for more organizational processes, like how does nature self-organize? If you look at this huge termite mound that must be home to millions of termites, think about how they made that structure. How there is not one sort of boss telling all the other termites where to put their grain of sand. They all do it collectively. And the way this works is because they're using some very simple rules at the individual level and very direct feedback loops. So every individual termite knows if it's still working according to the rule. And probably their rules are something like keep putting a sand grain, keep building unless you detect CO2 or unless you detect oxygen, because many termite species within the termite mound, they farm a fungus that need a stable temperature. So the design of the termite mound is based on their food supply that they farm themselves within the termite mound. Or think about how these geese migrate. Well, you probably know that the goose in front, it's sort of a rotating leadership because it's not the same one all the time in the front position. And we have known for a longer time that it is because, well, if you are in the front, you get a lot of headwind, so you get tired more quickly. And that's why they rotate. But scientists also found out some time ago that not all geese know the entire route, or there's not one that knows the entire route. So they also take turns based on their experience and on what they know. So this is something perhaps you could translate to project teams. Do you need one and the same project manager all the time? Or could you take rotational turns? Or could you maybe apply this in schools and education? Does the teacher always need to be the teacher? Or could sometimes you might have kids in class that about a certain subject know even better or know more or different things? Can you rotate the learning skills? So also from those kind of processes, you can learn a lot. And then, of course, we can look at systems. So we can look at natural ecosystems to create natural ecosystems that are great at filtering water, purifying water, and can be mimicked that. In this case, they also use the plants themselves, but they really observed, this is from living machines, They really observed what plants are doing what, then bacteria will come in and little snails, and there's a different process that they have put then within these greenhouses, so they can mimic the capabilities of an entire system. Or think about how breweries are, if they are producing in a very linear way, are very sort of wasting lots of materials. This is an example from Wildwood Brewing. It's a US-based company, but now, because they were one of the first, and many other breweries have followed their way of doing things. And if you look at how they traditionally brewed their beer, then you could see that all these green things here on the left are the inputs for making beer, and all the red arrows or the lines is all the output. So apart from the beer itself. So there's lots of water and hop and yeast and whatever going in there. And then also lots of waste materials that would just end up in a sewage treatment plant or would up in landfill or go into the atmosphere. So yeah, lots of barley malt is needed to just produce a little bit of beer. And at some point in time, they started going from a linear to a circular system, inspired by nature, because nature knows no waste. Everything is reused. And well, I think this picture is maybe not the clearest. I'm not going through everything, but it's more to show you how it's not now a linear way of doing with an input-output, but all the outputs are now inputs again. So you could even start thinking, is the core business of brewing beer, is it still brewing beer? Maybe there is a better business model in the agriculture with the spirulina algae that is also going into medication and healthcare, or perhaps there is even more money to make with mycoculture, so edible mushrooms and stuff like that. So you can also learn from nature's ecosystems to have your own company become part of a larger business ecosystem. So, and then I wanted to sort of finish. We have the why biomimicry, what is it, but also how we do it, and a bit more about the sort of the structured process there. Well, basically there are two ways how you could do it. You can start with biology. So we call it biology to design. So I'm addressing first the left graphic. And this is typically sort of your inventor mode. You start to discover a natural model. Richard showed you some pictures, and then you had to think about the functions of these, of the shells, the snail shell or flowers or whatever. Well, this is also how Velcro was invented. How this Swiss guy walking with his dog found all these burrows stuck in its fur and socks, and then started thinking about, what is the function of this? What is this bird doing? How can I abstract that strategy? He started thinking about, what is it actually doing, and where could I apply this? So in which context? Maybe then he started to brainstorm the idea of having Velcro. I don't think this guy integrated life's principles. We'll talk a bit more about that later. But so the key thing from this part is that you start with a natural model that you're fascinated about, and you start thinking, who could benefit from the strategy that this organism is applying? And you come out somewhere. Well, the other way is that you start with a challenge. So you start with thinking about, what is it that I want to solve for? And in that case, we start with the scoping phase. And within the scoping phase, we think about functions. It's a really important point. And functions that need to be met in certain contexts. And again, life's principles, I will say a little bit about it later. But first, so think about what is it that you want to solve for, in which context. And then, once you know it, we start looking for natural models. We try to find as many as we can, and we look at the underlying principles. We try to abstract those principles, and then they become the input for your creative brainstorm, in which you start emulating those natural design principles and apply them to a potential solution. And in the end, we evaluate them again against life's principles. So both of them are iterative processes, but they have a different starting point. That is sort of the main thing I'd like you to remember from this. And in both cases, we walk the function bridge. So on one side, we have human design challenges. On the other hand, we have biological models. And if you start from the biological model, you will walk it, maybe the bridge the other way around. You walk for the downward arrow, or you start with a challenge. And once you know what your function is you're looking for, you go with find your biological models, which you then apply to your challenge again. And to make that a bit more concrete, and I think this is maybe a little bit overlapping with Richard's already said, well, but we cannot stress the importance of identifying functions. We also see that, especially for engineers, this is maybe difficult, because if they are so solution-minded, they just want to think about the solution and not so much about the function. But kids are actually quite good at this. So function is a verb. And whereas a noun is just a name. So a cactus is a noun, a water bottle is a noun. But what they have in common is that they both can store liquids. So we are interested in the verbs. Or if you look at the firefly, which is a name, so a noun, and the light bulb again is a noun, they both create light. Or the shark skin and the soap, both nouns, but what they have in common is that they manage bacteria. So we are not so much interested in, for instance, making a more efficient air conditioner. We are interested in the question, how would nature cool this space, or how would nature regulate this space? And if you stay away from the air conditioner and you stick with the regulate temperature, then you may find many different kind of solutions. So you broaden up your solution space. And as we said, it's not only the function. So if you stay with the regulate temperature, it's not only the function, it's also the context. So the termite mound was inspiration for an office building in Harare in Zimbabwe, but perhaps you live somewhere with a very different context. And this is not just temperature-wise or geographical, it can also be cultural, social context, financial context. There's many things you need to take into account if you want to address this. But I also must say that if we teach biomimicry to younger kids, we usually focus mainly on the function. And the older they get, the more contextual things you can bring in. Otherwise, it just becomes maybe too complicated. So, and if you want to do all this, one big tool we use is the website Ask Nature, if you are not familiar with it. So yes, still go outdoors, but also this is a website that is organizing organisms based on the function. And if you go into the search and you type in, well, for instance, regulate temperature or distribute whatever, a verb, then you will find many organisms that can do it. And then I think I promised to say something also about life's principles, because sometimes people ask me, if I want to do biomimicry, do I need to know about all these different organisms? Is it then sort of a lottery what you will find? Well, I wanted to show you these two sort of frameworks that we work with. And so on the left, you see life's principles. These are sort of overarching set of principles that all organisms, almost all organisms, adhere to. Under these 6 principles in green, there is a whole subset. So in total, there are 26 principles, but together they allow life to create conditions to conducive to life. So the more you integrate these in designs, whether it's a product or a system or policy, the more we are also able to create conditions that are conducive to life. And you will see in the BioLearn materials that we are using we have used life's principles before, but we are also using nature's 10 unifying patterns. And these are sort of a simplification of the life's principles, but there's still more, abstracted principles from, based on all the strategies of the different organisms that you can also use both as a tool for inspiration, for coming up with new ways to include in your designs, and as an evaluation tool. And I think, I already saw that brings me to the very end. And if you're interested in these, there's so much more information about this. Also, you can find this online. We can share stuff with you. But it's just too much to go deep into it now. So that is what I wanted to say about this. Well, maybe if I stop sharing, I can see if there's some questions, or hopefully my colleagues have already answered them.
Verbs rather than nouns.
Yeah.
Maybe that can be shared.
Okay, I'm just trying to go quickly to all the chats, because whilst I was talking, I couldn't read them. But yeah, I see some people sort of tipping the teaming book is really interesting. Yeah. Well, I don't see, I'm not sure if I see any pressing questions. And so I'm going to announce the next person, but also I think I need to make her first the co-host. Or did you already do that?
Saskia, I will make the screen sharing, and that will talk.
Okay, so
I may introduce Datti.
okay, yes, please do.
Okay, so Datti, I hope you are around. Her
Yes, I'm here.
real name is Bernadett Barat from a Hungarian school, and she took part in a project in trying out the models, and came to the study trip, and also made a wonderful biomimicry day in her school. So I shared the PowerPoint, and Datti will talk.
Okay, hello everyone, good afternoon. So I would like to speak about our biomimicry day, which was in April, and you can turn to the next page, Eva, please. Before the event, we have to prepare and organize a lot of things together with Eva and Marta, because we have had to choose the models, the activities which we wanted to show to the kids. We worked with almost 140 students in that day. And this day was on the 23rd of April, 2024. This is the week of
for 3.8 billion years. And
sustainability in
in that
Hungary.
time, life has learned what works and what's appropriate here and what lasts
I
here.
can hear some.
And
Yes, I don't know what
idea
the
is
voice
that,
is.
perhaps we should be
Okay.
I don't know.
Can you go back for a minute, Eva?
Yes, I try to.
Okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
okay, it's here.
Sorry. So the pre-work was a little bit difficult because I had to divide the number of the students for 8 groups, because we made 8 different stages for the activities. My colleagues was the leaders of the stages, and there were some older students who were trained for introduced and explained and showed the activities to the children on the stages. How old were those students? I can see this question. They were 10 and 12 years old students. So this means they are in year 5 and 6 in our school, in our school system. So, and we shared the program for 3 or 4 parts. The first one was, what is biomimicry? You can turn the page over to the next.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. What is biomimicry? We were in our gym because there were a lot of students there, as you can see, and Eva introduced what is biomimicry with a presentation for the kids. There are some kids who know about biomimicry, who has heard about biomimicry, because I think last year or 1 year before last year, Marta took them a presentation about biomimicry. But there are a lot of children who have never heard about it. So this was the first part of our biomimicry day, and you can turn the page over. Yes, and on the 8 stages, the groups went around like a revolving stage, and they can try out the experiments, the activities. The other students explain them what is happening there, and they could give an explanation about scientific part of the experiments. Then on the next slide, if you turn it, they could start the biovation process. They got the experiments from was the BioLearn stage. Eva and Marta gave them, brought them. Yes, they are on the BioLearn website. So the biovation time, the kids worked in smaller groups. I think there were 5 or 6 children in one group, and they could get some parts of plants and animals like stems and shells, and I don't remember exactly what were those things, and they could examine them, and they could find out an innovation about them. So you can see this process here. They worked on their own innovations, on their own ideas. And the last part was our biomimicry day, was when the children gave their explanations and presentation to the other groups, and the groups could ask them about their innovations. And at the end of the whole event, Eva evaluated the whole day. So it took, I think, from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, as I remember. Am I right, Eva? So it was a very long process.
Yes, it was about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a all day project for the children. And after the event, Eva sent me some surveys, which were filled by the kids, but I'm not sure. I don't think I get some results about them. Maybe you have the results. I don't know exactly what was the opinion of the kids. So
yes, I have the results, but not in front of me. But
okay,
most of the kids enjoyed it. So that was the conclusion, that it was similar to the one that I think Saskia just showed, that most of the kids enjoyed it, and most of them would like to learn more about biomimicry. So they were quite enthusiastic. And yes, I think these two parts of the biomimicry day, like the experiments and the biovation, it was really good together. So
yes, and I think they enjoyed it. So they told it to me too on my biology lesson. So I hope it was a successful event. So that's all.
okay, thank you, Datti.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And I don't know if we have some questions directly to you. Yes, Richard wrote that we have the data.
Can't see it, unfortunately, the messages, but I don't know why. Oh, I can't see anything here, sorry.
Okay, someone asked, I would like to know the amount of the students. There were about 114. 40.
140, 40, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was
Can
a
you
huge
give an
event.
example from the innovations? Do you remember some?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Maybe there was a code there. I think it was a waterproof code, which they found out. And oh, I don't remember exactly. I'm sorry. I have to check my presentation. Maybe I can remember. I'm sorry. I don't.
But we can check and write
Yes,
it.
we can check it at school.
Yes, and in Slovakia, more than 1,300 pupils tried out.
Oh my God.
But not at the same time. So in your school,
not
it
at the
was
same
at the
time,
same
but-
time. Yes.
But these 140 kids were together at the same time. Yes, it was a huge event in our school too. Okay.
Okay, so maybe we can pass the word back to Richard about the questions. Richard, you are muted.
My wife would say that is a blessing, but I've unmuted myself now. So yes, thank you, Detty. That was fantastic. So we have a bit of time for some questions now. The power of biomimicry means there's still over 110 people on the conference, so that's pretty impressive. So we have our panel of experts. We have Saskia, we have Sam, we have Ava and Claudia, and all our biomimicry experts from the project. So we have a few minutes for some questions if anybody has any. And I'm going to suggest you put your questions in the chat. But to get us started, I'm just going to ask Sam a question. Kind of what is it that, you've done biomimicry with schools for a long time. What is it that inspires young people the most about biomimicry?
There's not one single answer, which is why it's part of why it's so great. Because, for younger kids, it can be as simple as trying to break that egg, just interacting with some part of nature and becoming surprised about it, learning something new. When you think about why maybe you fell in love with the natural world, it's made up of these types of experiences, right? These small moments. And that's definitely the power of this kind of work with young kids. It's also carries through with older students and even adults. So, I've done workshops with professional engineers, chemists, and so on. And we do these very similar types of activities with them because it also works with older people, because that's also, what kind of built our fascination with the world was these little experiences. With older students, I think one of the things that works so well about biomimicry is older students have now heard, they've heard about climate change. They've heard about the loss of biodiversity. Maybe they have seen it personally. And so they're concerned about the world, as they should be. And so what biomimicry brings to the table there is yet a lot more than just these little experiences. It brings, as people have mentioned, this authentic hope. Sustainability is not a rarity on this planet, right? It's the norm on this planet. Every other species, every other system works sustainably and has for billions of years. And so that understanding and that realization gives us an authentic reason to believe that humans can learn their way out of the mess they have created, and truly create a sustainable human-built presence on this planet as well. And that's very, very, very useful and powerful for older students who are genuinely concerned about things. So yeah, I think it depends on maybe what students you're working with, but there's a lot. It's a very rich resource for educators to bring biomimicry to their students. So yeah, that's I could go on, but we'll leave it there for now.
Well, I think there's a really good follow-up question from Connie. Often it's easy to do biomimicry as a one-off in a STEM club, as a special day, but if we're really to kind of get students engaged and really harness the transformative power of biomimicry, Connie's asking, well, how can we incorporate this way of learning into the standard school curriculum? How can we make it part of the STEM curriculum, part of languages, not just a nice add-on we could do because it's Earth Day? That's
such a great question. This has been a life project for me. I think the really hopeful thing about that is it's clear that you can teach any subject by incorporating biomimicry and other phenomena about the natural world. You know, at the Center for Learning with Nature, we've made an enrichment curriculum to teach math, for example, to 7th graders, so about 13-year-old students, by looking at phenomena in nature in order to teach the math content that teachers have to teach. So I'm sure in the various countries represented here, we all have these education standards, right? There's certain things that teachers have to teach. But the fact is, you know, if you're talking about, say, the number pi, you can talk about it in an abstract way and so forth. You can use 22 divided by 7 to describe it mathematically, but you also can go outside with a piece of string and wrap it around a tree and compare that to a piece of string across the diameter of the tree, and teach the kids about pi that way as well. And that has a lot of benefits to it. Of course, it's hands-on. It's more vivid for them to understand that concept. But they've also hung around a tree for a little while, which has its own benefits. So that's just one tiny example. But what we have learned is that the more we think about it, we can teach any subject, any content, any standard by bringing the natural world into that learning. And whenever we do that, the learning becomes that much more effective, more exciting for the students and also for the teachers, which is very important. So, you know, the specific answer to that wonderful question is a long answer, but we'll leave it there for now. But there are resources out there that you can start to look at, created by all sorts of folks. And so, you know, reach out to us and we'll point you to them. Great question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. I mean, also, we are a kind of a network of educators. And if we all started looking at the curriculum and looking at the access points, I'm sure we could quite easily start to find those ways in. And as soon as educators kind of start to realize the power of biomimicry, because those natural skills of inquiry, curiosity, observation are kind of core skills in lots of different disciplines. And then with the added kind of excitement of learning about sustainability, doing something which is useful and hopeful towards your future, it has a very kind of powerful effect. So we're coming up to the time when we're going to break out into the national conferences. And I know everybody will want to have a quick break, go to the bathroom, get a cup of tea, just breathe for a few minutes. So we are going to move into the national parts very soon, but I'm just going to invite Sam maybe to say a few final words about, before we spin off into our different countries. Any final comments, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say the word wow is in my head. It's in my body. I mean, talk about verbs. The verb for me is wow. I mean, I've worked with this topic for nearly 20 years, and you know, it's just wonderful to hear from the folks that we've heard from. I still learn about stuff every day when I listen to things like this. So I don't know, is your brain full out there? So, you know, throw a comment in the chat for us. Let us know what your reaction to all of this is. And then, yeah, we will get to spend more time at the national level, which we'll get to, you know, drill down a little bit, maybe hopefully answer some of the questions that you've raised a little bit more specifically. So yeah, we'll take a short break, and then we'll all meet with our national groups. And I hope that all of you have the links to those meetings. And if you don't, please let us know, and we'll get you to where you need to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So all the national conferences start at 4 p.m. Central European Time, apart from the English, which starts at 4:10, because the English people need to have a cup of tea first. So if you're Turkish, Slovak, Czech, Hungarian, Dutch, 4 o'clock is your start time. The links are all in the chat now, so maybe just click it now, then it'll be ready for when 4 o'clock comes. Same for the English link, click it now, and it'll be there. We'll be there at 4:10 to let you in, and we'll do some biomimicry design work together. So you will become innovators in less than 2 hours. What a skill. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Saskia. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, Detti. Thank you, Susanna, behind the scenes, doing all the technical stuff.
And thank you, Richard and Sam.
Claudia, the other Richard, and all the team and Milada, who's there somewhere. So thank you, everybody, and keep being inspired by biomimicry. And we'll see you again soon.
Yes, thank you everybody for this part. See you in another link.
Yes, see you.
Bye and see you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Wat er zo? Dan is een doorheen.
Hi, hello.
Ja, ik heb ook iemand gehoord. Nou weet ik niet waar ze zit. Nee, dat is niet wel.
Oké, ben je blij? Ging het goed?
Jawel, dat ging wel goed. Maar kijk, hier hoefde ik niet zo... Oh. Shit.